Welcome to the Support Automation Show, a podcast by Capacity. Join us for conversations with leaders in customer or employee support who are using technology to answer questions, automate processes, and build innovative solutions to any business challenge. I'm your host, Justin Schmidt. Hey, Jeff, how's it going?
Going well. It's sunny and cool down here in Charleston, South Carolina, so I can't complain right now.
I was just going to ask you where this podcast finds you. Love South Carolina.
Yeah, this is my favorite time of year. So it is not too hot yet, and as soon as it hits July, August, September, you're kind of you're looking for ways out. But right now, you're looking for ways to stay and be outside. So definitely my favorite time of year, especially if I can go outside, maybe find a beer somewhere at a brewery or something like that. So it's been fun.
Yeah, St. Louis, Missouri, which is where we are, is a very similar weather situation where you got like 3 or 4 nice weeks out of the year, but otherwise it's, you walk outside in the heat and humidity, you're just like, what am I doing with my life?
That's very true.
So thank you for coming on, Jeff. Really appreciate it. Tell me a little bit about Higher Logic and your role there.
Yeah, so Higher Logic is a engagement platform. So we were really born in the community space and have helped organizations and associations build online communities for a long time. And subsequently, we've also added email as a part of that kind of engagement and, potentially subsequently adding other things over time as we start thinking more about what that means in kind of the digital age, but really focused on driving engagement for our associations and for our customers and thinking about community, how it's rooted in the sense of bringing peers together, bringing, learnings. How do you have events and hold discussions together? So that's what Higher Logic does. And then my role is I'm the director of customer experience. And so I've got a couple of areas that I'm playing in right now. One is our customer community. So I play a big role in trying to bring our customers together and drive some of that peer engagement. I play a role in our education and training. So we've got a great team. And so we're always trying to find how do we help our customers make sure that they're, getting the information they need to be successful on our platform. And then the third part is really around scaling our customer success strategy. So how are we engaging with customers, as we start growing, as much as I'd love that we can have, really one-to-one type interactions, it's just necessity of our business and the way that we're growing that we need to, find ways and strategies that we can automate, that we can drive some efficiency and hopefully still keep up a very high level of engagement and a very high level of effectiveness doing that. So that's kind of my role right now in those 3 buckets.
Yeah, that's very interesting because when you look at the impetus for enacting change in any function within a business, but customer facing roles, especially, you have sort of great success is an impetus for change to and adopt and keep up with the growth. And then you sort of have the opposite end of that where you have to adapt to a sort of less friendly change in the business. And it's always good to hear people who are on the journey, on the upward trajectory, and very exciting to hear and super excited for you guys. When you think about how you got started in customer support and the facilitation of doing it at scale, especially, what's the story there? How was this something you sort of fell into? Was it a once in a lifetime opportunity kind of thing, or is this a plan? Just curious how you got into the world.
Yeah, I think kind of backed my way into it, so to speak. I was very much an analyst, data kind of behind the scenes. Really loved to be looking at A/B tests or how we were doing things, and I think what tended to happen is that I really had to become good at architecting stories. So, data is one thing, but being able to tell a story with that data and help bring people along in a journey is, I think, where I really started to maybe push those skills. And that, I think, in turn, started to get me to be a little bit more customer facing. And so I really went into roles that were maybe more akin to like a customer success manager, into roles like an account manager. And that's kind of where my career's been for a number of years. And, I think when we, Jay Nathan, my business partner, and I, when we had our consulting firm, those skills continue to happen. We're helping customers. And then, even today, I think, the best thing or biggest thing about my day is trying to engage with as many customers as possible, listening, trying to hear what they're saying, hear their challenges, the opportunities that are there. But just having those conversations is really a joy for me. But getting back to the root of your question, I think, again, kind of the heart for me was, finding and architecting stories and then really being close to the customer was, I think what drew me towards this kind of customer realm and being involved with customers on a regular basis, daily basis, interacting with them.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about the role customers play in an organization. You have, obviously, they're the paramount it's of paramount importance that they are successful, because if a customer is not successful, business is not successful. But your customers are also your best source of product pipeline ideas. They're your best source of, incremental revenue for the business with renewals, upsells, et cetera, et cetera. So getting into that community, getting into the business needs of these people, listening to them and bringing that feedback into an organization is a part of the sort of customer support experience I think often gets, I wouldn't say overlooked, but the average person sometimes thinks like, well, I need to return something to Best Buy or whatever it is. And you start chatting or phone call or whatever, but there's a lot more to it than that. So, we're here on the Support Automation Show and like to talk about automation and how it impacts support. And customers are one of the entities that deals with automation a lot. When I say the word support automation, what does that mean to you?
I think when you first kind of, threw it out there, for me, I think it really starts to come down. I think about it maybe in two realms. Mm-hmm. I started to compartmentalize it as like, what does support automation mean for kind of the customer facing activity? So how are we making it easier for the customer to engage with us? How are we making it a better experience for them? How are we making sure that they can get the answer to what they need to quicker? Right. And then I think on the back end, that kind of means, how are we thinking about some of our operational metrics that are going to drive success? And are we being as effective as possible with the resources we have? Are we being as resourceful as possible? And so bringing it in from kind of both realms. That's kind of what first jumped into my mind when you threw it out there.
Yeah, it's obviously a capacity here. We develop products to help automate a lot of the both back-end workflows that happen within an organization, but also some of the customer-facing stuff, whether it be AI chat or whatever it is. But one thing that's been really fun for me doing this show and talking to leaders in this space, such as yourself, is there is a lot to think about. There's a lot to incorporate. There's a lot of different tools out there. There's a lot of different best practices. One thing you said when we were connecting to do this show that I thought was really interesting, and especially given your background with some of the communities you've ran, plus with where you're at Higher Logic now, is this concept of community. And when you think of automation and communities, there's a little bit of dissonance there that sort of naturally comes up in the mind. We're like, oh, well, are we, if we're automation is using machines and computers and software to do things that humans don't necessarily have to do, community is by its definition a very human experience, right? I would love to hear how you see the opportunity for combining these two concepts, automation and community, what some of the challenges may be in this. It's an interesting topic and you're uniquely positioned to explore it. So I'd love to do that with you. Yeah.
I actually love the way you set that up. It just kind of architected a nice picture in my head. And, I think by and large, the challenge that comes, when you start thinking about automation is that I think people's immediate reaction when they start thinking about automation or scaling or technology, right, is to jump to the worst case scenario, which is, oh my gosh, the automation is going to take over the world, or technology, right? Like there's not going to be a role for a human to play. And I think the balance there, or what you need to find, right, is how are you utilizing technology or utilizing automation or scaling to help augment what the humans are doing, right? What the person is doing. And so when I think about that for community, The way that we try and talk about that with our customers is thinking about what are the most effective things that you can be doing as a community manager. That is probably engaging with your members on a regular basis. It's probably being in front of your members in videos like, we're doing today, or phone calls, or, things that require you to be there, that you are kind of solely chosen to do, right? Like only you can really be doing that type of work. And then think about all the things that it takes to do that. So let's just maybe take an example of throwing an event, right?
Yep.
If I'm going to throw an event in my community, that's going to have 200, 300, 400 people. I mean, my goal would be to talk to every single one of them. That's what I want to do, right? And unfortunately, though, that's time, that it takes for me to reach out and talk to all those customers. So when you start thinking about it is, okay, if I'm going to bring people up to the stage, maybe those are people I need to meet with. Maybe that's 10 people that are coming onto the stage that I need to bring on and kind of have that human touch point with. But maybe for everybody else, we've got a great sign up form where we collect the right information. And then that helps us still personalize the experience through some automation, right? We're collecting, hey, why are you coming to this event? What are you hoping to get out of it? That allows you to start segmenting. And I think that's where you really start to drive some of the power of automation, is that if you're asking some of the right questions and leading up to it, then you've got great ways to segment, and then you can use your technology and automation to your advantage. And again, then your focus as kind of the leader of the community is then focused on the right activities, which is engaging the members, is running the session. And you're not necessarily worried about, is the follow-up email going to go out? Is the pre-email going to go out? How do people sign up, right? Those are all the pieces that automation and technology can take. So I just think, for community leaders out there, I think that's the question that we always challenge them with is, what is the thing that you're solely qualified to do, and that the most important thing that you should be doing? And then, what are the other parts that lead up to that we can really start to think about for automation, technology, scaling? How can that all get involved? So I think that's how I normally try and think about it, and we try and bring that to our customers.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The implementation of technology, and specifically, doing scare quotes here, scary technology like AI, which isn't scary at all, but the Terminator movies are popular for a reason, right? And like everyone always thinks, my Alexa devices are going to take over the world. I shouldn't have said that because I just triggered one. But what's interesting to me, and you touched on this, and I've been thinking about this a lot the past week or so, because I had an experience myself where I had a very esoteric issue with my internet here at the house. And I went on my ISP's website. I was greeted with a chatbot. And as someone who's in this business, I know what I'm looking at. And they did a good job of trying to get my question answered and figured out before they have to connect me with an actual agent. But when I got on the phone with the agent, it was, again, this is a fairly esoteric issue. So I was on the phone with them for a little bit. She and I had this great conversation. We connected about some things. We both lived in similar parts of the country for a period in our lives. And it was just this really great sort of human experience. And in a world where automation and these types of technologies are being implemented well, it frees up this agent that I was talking to have this kind of connection and to be able to spend the brain cells that are required for a somewhat thorny issue like I was dealing with. She got it figured out. Everything's good. But in a world where automation is not part of this ISP's, I don't know why I'm trying not to say the word charter here, but in a world where this ISP has to, they have tons and tons of customers with questions all day long. They have to automate some portion of the process in order for the business to work. And this is a great example of micro scale of kind of what you're talking about within a larger community. But I was able to have a human to human connection with this person. And in a world where I have to go to a live agent for every single thing, you end up with agents that are answering the same question over and over and over and over again. They're maybe frustrated from having to do that. The turnover inside the organization is higher because agents are frustrated. So the way automation is brought in to support experience, whether it's for customers or even internally with employees, definitely frees people up for the higher order tasks. So you're right. Like community is human connection at a larger scale. And if we can bring in technology to enable human connection at a larger scale, then we're winning. So fascinating topic here. When you think about the approach specifically at, and this is a really interesting question for you because of Higher Logic, both sitting sort of as a community enabler of communities, but also Higher Logic has customers who therefore need support. What's the approach to automating support, and what portions of support get automated at Higher Logic?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different ways maybe that we're thinking about driving some of the customer experience for our customers around support. So I think one is we're definitely trying to think about the intersection of community support and knowledge base and training and education. I think there's really a trifecta when you start thinking about those experiences. And I think the more and more we go in the future, I think about how those experiences are going to become one, where I'm now going to essentially one place where I'm looking for these things. I'm having kind of a singular experience. Whereas now, I think just like the example you gave, and probably there's tons of others that I can think of, is they all feel very disparate, right? I go to an education or training website that is different from the support and knowledge base that is different from the community. And so I think first that's the future I envision. And so one of the things that we're trying to do here is think about how are we unifying those experiences. And right now we're doing subtle things like, do we have the same menus and headers and footers? And can we just make the visual experience look somewhat similar so a customer feels like there is continuity in their experience? But the reason I brought that up is one is that self-service. So we're always thinking about how are we allowing our customers to get to the right area where they think they can find an answer, and how can we make that as easy as possible for them? I think that is a different form of automation, but I just think that is a really important, critical part for us is that we need to allow our customers to themselves just go on an experience and search for what they need to and hopefully find the right answer. And that way, we can start alleviating hopefully some of the tickets or some of the challenges that come across our support team's desk. So I think, the reason I bring that up is I just think that is a really critical part for us is that if we can nail that first part right, I think this goes to your point, then we know when a challenge comes across our support team's desk, then we know it's there for a reason, right? They've kind of exhausted the first option. They've looked, they've been there, they've seen those things, and it didn't hit the mark on the first one. So I think that's maybe the first part. I'll stop there, and then I'll tell you maybe a little bit more about what we're automating. Does that make sense? That kind of first unifying in part?
It makes complete sense because you have to, planes are able to take off when the runway is clear, right? So there's a lot of magic to be made by starting the experience off on the right foot. And something as simple as, and it's interesting, just it may sound simple on the surface, but ultimately having two systems look like it's part of the same whole is not something that should be taken for granted. And I 100% agree with you on that. You had a part two you were getting ready to go into.
Yeah. So I think there's, so I think the second thing, we actually just worked through this quite a bit, is we actually went back and kind of looked at how we were asking some of the questions on an initial form for somebody to kind of request, help from our team. And some of the things that we noticed was, it was just a little, sometimes in some cases, it was a little vague. We weren't really asking for kind of clear, crisp, concise information. And then I think we weren't really asking maybe all of the things that we felt like we could be asking. I think there obviously has to be a balance when you think about, somebody filling out a form or a survey of some kind, right? You kind of need to think about, okay, is this too many questions? Are they going to stop halfway through and just exit because they're frustrated? But I think, in some cases we weren't really asking maybe the right questions. And so that kind of exercise for us was really helpful because the more specific we got, in some of the questions that we were asking, it really allowed for some of the back end information that we have. So thinking about how are we responding, in terms of just that first initial touch point, how are we getting better information for our teams so that we can start thinking about solving cases with fewer touch points so that we don't have to, essentially bother the customer as much. That kind of number of touches was a really big factor for us in thinking about, I think in some cases, there's sometimes automation can work against that, right? We might have automated emails that don't really need to happen. And then it kind of, it interrupts the experience that we're trying to have. So I think kind of that form, and then some of the ways that we were then taking those answers, and then we were using automation behind us to segment and route the tickets in the right way. Like one of the challenges, or the second challenge I think we had after alleviating that form was, do we have the right people doing the right work? And so that form up front was really valuable for us to get right, because then we could actually start routing the right work to the right teams. And so, for instance, we have a support team, and then we've got a support integrations team. And so if you're trying to integrate with our system, we've got a specific team for that. Well, in the old world, what would happen is a ticket would come through, it would be for an integration, but it would hit our kind of tier 1 or level 1 support first. And then we'd have to move it to the integrations team. And, it sounds minor, right? That's just kind of moving one ticket, but think about doing that consistently, and it just becomes a hassle. Yes. And then we don't have the right metrics on it, and we're not using the right automation in terms of follow-up. We don't have the right SLAs attached to it. So there's all these things that kind of came out. But that was just like one clear indication of how we could go do that better. Utilizing the form. So I think the customer communications got clearer, our routing behind the scenes got better, and then the metrics that we could associate for different types of tickets and touch points that we needed was a lot more crisp. So that was maybe one example of how we kind of took that form and really tried to go through an exercise recently to help us drive a better experience with the customer, but then also drive some of the efficiency behind the scenes for us that's going to help us be more effective.
Yeah, you just gave what I hope to get out of every one of these conversations that I have, which is like something super actionable for the people listening to be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to take that. I'm going to turn around and take that into the team. And that is thinking about the design of what you're doing before you just start toggling check marks or check boxes in your tech and buying new tech and sort of overthinking the problem. We do a lot of work with HR teams and for employee business, BDE employee support type deals. And I have a webinar I give occasionally on this topic. And one of the things that we always recommend of our clients, and I think anybody doing anything with software, rolling out a new vendor inside the organization, really map out the process you're trying to do. Like, what are your KPIs? What are your goals? And make sure that just from a sort of procedural manual workflow perspective, you're collecting the right data at the right time. And then when you bring in technology on top of that, you start really adding bandwidth to the whole process, right? But if a poorly designed job system or a poor job design, poor workflow design up front is not something that's sprinkling technology on the top of it's going to solve, right? So very astute observation on thinking about something even as simple as the intake form and how an optimization there has a cascading effect down the line on the operation. Great stuff.
Yeah. And maybe to carry on that point too, I'm thinking about some of the maybe the things that I picked over my career, or kind of the advice that I've gotten before that kind of still rings true for me is like what you just mentioned. I think sometimes people try and automate too quickly. And I actually think going through the manual process of, hey, what does it take today? What are the manual steps that we're doing? How do we architect that? And then how do we just go do it, right? How do we actually go consistently do it for 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever the time frame is that needs to make sense? But to me, that does a couple of things. It like you said, solidifies, do we have the right workflow before we actually implement technology? But the second thing that I think it does is it keeps you close to the customer. When you start thinking about some of the automation and technology that you put in place, you're actually kind of putting a barrier between you and the customer. And so I think that, and again, that kind of inhibits your empathy towards their situation and putting yourself in their shoes, right? So when you start designing a process and thinking about the manual nature of it and start thinking about, the touch points and things that are happening, you inherently have to put yourself in the customer's shoes because you're interacting with the customer most likely in some of those scenarios. And so you are going to think about, just like we were talking, you are going to think about how does the intake form actually hit for them, or what does it look like? How do they go through it? Hey, what about our first touch email or a second touch email? How does that look, feel? And those are the things that I think if you can get those right before you implement the technology, that's where I think you were just getting at, where it really becomes functional and it becomes something that's really impactful. I can't tell you how many times I've done this myself. I'm kind of being maybe the walking cliche, right? I've gone in and said, hey, I already know the answer. Like, let's just bring in this technology and we can automate X, Y, and Z. then it doesn't go right. And like you said, there's an element of change, right, internally that you have to go through, and you kind of lose credibility really quickly as a leader. If you come in and say, I already have the answer, I'm going to implement this technology, and then it fails, people start sitting there saying, all right, what does this guy really know? Does he really know what he's doing? And so I think you just, as much as you can, try and approach cautiously, think about design first, think about the customer experience, and then think about, implementing technology after you've done those things and execute.
Yeah, you hit on something that's near and dear to my heart, and that is establishing credibility as a leader. I have people that I am responsible for their success, and it's an amazing team that we have here. I couldn't be more proud of the work they do. They look to me as a leader, and I have a responsibility to them to make sure they're in the best position for success, right? And with something like automation, if a frontline support rep hears that, oh, we're going to get some sort of automation tool, does this mean I'm going to be put out of a job? Well, no. And it's incumbent on the leader to ensure that there's trust there, to ensure that the buy-in is there, and the credibility, which is the word you used that stood out to me, is paramount. And making all those decisions beforehand on mapping out the process, thinking through your KPIs, et cetera, everything we just talked about is what enables that credibility to happen, so that when you do bring in a new tool, you're not met with skepticism. You're met with the feeling that this person has, the best interest of the company and myself at heart here. And that's super important. When you think about the future of support automation, and what do you see the world of support looking like in 5 to 10 years based off of the trends in support automation and technology that you see today?
I think, going back to, the example I talked about a little bit earlier, I mean, I really do see the functions of a kind of a customer community, education and training, and then knowledge and support. I really start to see how those start to become more of a one-time experience, where I can go to one place, search for, and get multiple or various types of content. So I go and search one time for, moderation. Great. Now I'm getting an education 5-minute quick hit video. I'm getting a support or documentation article. So I think, to me, like, that just becomes kind of paramount to where I think everything is going, is that's going to be one unified experience. I think the huge benefit when you start thinking about that, or where I see the next thing going, is you start to track customers. That sounds like a bad thing. I think you just start to get better analytics on customers and contacts specifically. So I can better understand, what is Justin looking for? What is he specifically, individually wanting to know? I can tailor experiences so much better when I have that type of information. And so I think what you start to see in the future is a unification of that experience. And then therefore the byproduct is better individualized data, which means then we can personalize the experiences even further than we have today. And so then, the thought that comes to mind is, Justin goes and does a search. He looks at an education article. He looks at support. He goes to the customer community and looks at a thread. You know what? He has to put in a support ticket. And now when I pull up a support ticket, it shows me all the things that you've already done to go look at, and starts proposing solutions that are not those that you've already done. Right. And so I think about how that unification, that experience, though, is where maybe the disparate sources live today. There's some of that experience that I just mapped out, right? There's some of those things that we can currently do, right? You can do some AI based off of what I've looked at, maybe in the knowledge base, or what I've kind of done. But again, kind of going across those 3 experiences is where I see the future going, and then that's where I think that automation and some of the AI abilities on the front end of the customer experience side can get really, really good, and do that even better. And then I think on the back end, maybe in some of the internal things that we're doing, I think about I don't know the right answer, but I just think the challenge, or the thing that you see today, or when you kind of go into growing and scaling organizations, is typically a different support tool than the engineering tool, right? The classic example is I have Zendesk maybe for my support team, and then I've got
Jira or whatever for,
I've got Jira. And so I think about how does that experience get better, right? So that when a customer inputs a ticket, and maybe it's a bug that needs to get past engineering and live in Jira, how does that whole experience just become better? Because, in today's world, it's two systems talking to each other. It's two different teams also thinking about different processes, right? Bugs and engineering work differently than support is working with maybe a ticket. And so we need to, figure out what that experience looks like. So I don't know the right answer, but I just think there's got to be something that maybe starts to happen where those are starting to intersect maybe more. And there's some sort of solution that, again, thinks about putting the customer first and kind of bridging the gap between those two systems. So those are a couple of things that come to mind. Yeah,
you touched on something that made me think about my experience with the unnamed, well, we already named it, with my ISP last week. And it's actually really interesting because there's no reason they shouldn't know that I unplugged the router, waited 30 seconds and plugged it back in before I called, right?
Yep.
Like, clearly, if that worked, I would not have called. So yes, technology should enable these kind of things. And, you also touched on something that just is very topical. I don't know how much you're following the Apple and Epic trial and iOS 14.5 and the do not track and permissions for all that stuff, and Android and Google at I.O. yesterday, they talked a little bit about it. Tracking does kind of have a negative connotation, but like when you start watering down the glue between systems unable to pass data back and forth for each other, you can create potentially worse experiences, but not enabling that, right? So it's not all just advertising. There's other things that, third-party cookies or whatever rely on. So that's maybe another podcast, but very interesting you brought that up.
Yeah. No, it's a good point too, because I think like you said, it does get a negative connotation, but there's some really good value. And I think that's where, unfortunately, the cookie gate of 2021 is overlaying or is maybe playing a bigger role across, some of the good value that can come out of some of that.
Right.
Especially, I just think about personalization so much because I can't tell you. I worked in digital marketing for about 10 years of my career as well, and that tracking again can sometimes work against you. But at the end of the day, I'm always just like, hey, I'd much rather get an actual relevant ad to me.
Yes.
It's something that's actually relevant and meaningful. And, so what if they used a little bit of my data to get there?
Correct.
Because I just think at the end of the day, if it's personalized for me, that's a lot better than just getting generic ads left and right and kind of pumped into listening to things that won't ever really impact me.
Yeah, depending on the age of the person I'm talking to, the example I always give is, do you remember back in the day when you'd be on a website and you'd see an ad that says like, punch the monkey and win a free iPod or whatever, and there'd be like a little reticle and monkey going back, you have to click at the right time. Without cross-site tracking and personalization, you're going to start seeing a lot more of that stuff. So good stuff. We're going to end with I don't know if I want to call it the Fab Four, even though the old Michigan basketball team, I think, might have that trademarked, or the famous five, but the Nathan Lacka Show, if you'd listen, it's a good podcast for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm going to call this segment quite yet, but we'll figure it out. But just some quick fire round of some questions. Okay.
Cool.
What is the book you most often recommend to people?
Probably The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. It's a framework, kind of a management framework to run teams, and really it's for leaders of businesses, right? So when we were running our consulting firm, it was something that was close by because it was a very simple way to come up with a framework to point the team in the right direction and make sure everyone's on the same page. So I'd say, The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni is probably number one. I'm actually looking at it right here next to me. Very cool.
What's the best productivity hack or productivity tip that you've ever heard and implemented?
I'm going to give you two.
Yeah, go for it.
One's really goofy, but I'm a procrastinator at heart. And one thing that I've done recently, I tend to, have to do a lot of presentations. I do a lot of things like this, but I do a lot of webinars and things. And so if I'm struggling to kind of put pen to paper, so to speak, on what I need to do in terms of building slides, I'll actually unplug my computer. I'll go downstairs, and then I kind of make myself a game where I say, okay, I have until my computer dies to build the slides. And then whatever's done is basically what I'm going to present. And that kind of has forced me to put, that's kind of a goofy one that I do. That,
no, I like it.
I like to throw out there. The quick second one that I think is a good productivity hack for me is I do something every morning called the 3 things that I just call it. Not really that impressive, but every morning I have a little whiteboard. And so I go write 3 things on that whiteboard. And those are 3 things that if I can accomplish those today, then I'm going to call today a good day. And so they can be work, they can be personal, but it's just the 3 things that I just know are going to cause stress, cause whatever else. And if those are on my board and I can center and focus on those, and then I get those accomplished, it just has made my days feel a lot better and feel a lot more productive, even if I'm not accomplishing 20 things on my list. So that's something I do kind of every morning when I have my coffee and kind of sit down at my desk. I
love it. I like your homemade version of forcing constraints on yourself with the laptop battery or whatever, right? As laptops get more efficient, you're going to start giving yourself more time to dawdle there. But the sentiment is awesome. I love it. I have a feeling I know what the answer is going to be here, so I'm going to challenge you to list 2. If you could recommend one site, blog, Slack community, LinkedIn group, etc., for support leaders, what would it be?
Yeah, obviously the clear and obvious one. We started a community last year, so gaingrowretain.com is
great name, by the way.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we had some fun naming that thing. The second one that I'll give you is customer.education, and it is 2 guys that I've come across, Dave Darrington and Adam Lograntu, and they're really great education leaders. And I just think when you start thinking about ways to alleviate some of the challenges and constraints that you have in support, I always just kind of think about education and training first for your customers. And so I've picked up a lot of great things from their they've got episodes and a podcast. They do some content every once in a while. Appreciated that and learned so much.
Very cool. If you could take one person in the world of support out for coffee, meet them for lunch, or go have a beer with them, who would it be?
First would be you. Got to come give you a beer. Thanks. Give you a beer. In St. Louis next time I'm there. And then I would probably, I think I don't know who this person is today, but maybe just describing I would love to go talk with whoever leads support at one of these vendors. So similar to like you mentioned, right? We're a community company, and so we're kind of at an interesting intersection. I would love to go talk to the Zendesks, the Freshdesks, but like the support leaders of those organizations to see, have they really souped up their automation, their technology? How did they use it to their advantage? So I don't necessarily know the names of those people right now, but I'm thinking like, who are the leaders of kind of the CS operations or the customer support leaders of those types of organizations? Because I'm always intrigued, like, hey, if I peek behind the curtain, at Zendesk, at Freshdesk, at any of these tools, are you using your tool, and is it hypercharged way more than us? Like that's exactly what I'm always curious about.
Exactly. I once asked a account rep of ours at Salesforce what the Salesforce instance of Salesforce is at Salesforce, what it was like. And she said, it's very well run. And that made me feel a lot better because for the obvious reasons. Well, Jeff, this was a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on today. And for our listeners out there, if you're looking to build and leverage community within your organizations, Higher Logic is the place to go. And Jeff is the man to follow. Thanks so much for your time, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Justin. Enjoyed it, and looking forward to helping you all get this word out. I really appreciate the podcast you guys have. It's awesome.
Much appreciated. Thanks.
The Support Automation Show is brought to you by Capacity. Visit capacity.com to find everything you need for automating support and business processes in one powerful platform. You can find this show by searching for Support Automation in your favorite podcast app. Please subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Capacity, thanks for listening.